Welcome to the Practicing Accountant podcast, where we tackle the real challenge of running a modern accounting firm. The real challenges of being an accountant. Today's episode, we're exploring why busy shouldn't be a badge of honor. We'll discuss the pitfalls equating busyness with productivity, the importance of valuing your time, and how to create a more fulfilling and efficient practice. We hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks for watching. So Savannah Bananas is a baseball team. And I don't remember the name of the league they play in, but they understood that baseball can somewhat be tedious to watch.
Mm.
And so they devised a way of playing the game that just is completely different than how we've seen or come to know baseball. So they changed some rules. It's a normal baseball game, but the innings, each inning is just worth 1 point. And whoever gets the most runs in that inning gets a point. And so it's just 1 point per inning. And they also, if you're in the stands and there's a pop fly, if you catch it as someone in the audience watching, it's an out.
Okay.
And so they want people to get involved and engaged in the game a lot more than perhaps they normally would. They come out in like kilts, and they have great walkout music, and they're dancing. Like, they'll stop and just start doing like a TikTok dance or something during the middle of the game. I don't think they allow walks. I think you're either out or you hit. I think that
kind of a Harlem Globetrotters sort of esque.
Kind of, yeah. But they do a lot more, take a lot more liberty with the rules of the game than, say, the Globetrotters do with the game of basketball. So, but I have never seen them. I've only seen, social media and YouTube videos of them. So one day I hope to see them, but I just love the fact that they've taken something that was typically known, I don't know, like the public accounting business model, and completely changed it so that it's a much more enjoyable experience, not only for the players, but for the audience, which I think, and the way I've looked at it is I would love for public accounting to take a few cues from the Savannah Bananas and create a more enjoyable experience for all.
I'll have to check that out when I'm down there next. Well, our topic today is why busy isn't a badge of honor. What is the problem with saying you're busy, and are we truly busy, or are we inefficient with our resources?
Well, I was taught to lie, and that might be strong, but because in my position in public accounting, it was imperative for me not only to do the work but also sell the work.
Right.
If I was walking around town meeting with bankers and lawyers and potential clients and telling them all how busy I was, they might presume that I don't have any room to do their work, or they couldn't send me work because I was full. And so I would kind of fudge it and say, oh no, we're doing great. We got lots of room. And so I was walking around, basically asking to get shot in the foot, and touting that there was capacity when there wasn't any space. And solely because, giving off that impression that I couldn't do any more wouldn't really allow more to come. And so I was kind of taught the opposite, because my go-to answer usually was, oh, I'm swamped, I'm busy, I don't have any time for anything else. But in order to get new business, I learned a different way.
Interesting.
To your question on, back up, like busy and accounting have always gone together. I used to on Mondays, I would get the week before hourly report, and it would list everyone that I was a peer of. So, whatever level I was at the time, staff, senior, manager, partner, whatever. And I would get a report that showed the number of hours worked the week before. And if I wasn't at the top of the list, I'd feel a little bit bad. Like, I'd be a little bit pissed. Like, shit, I wasn't number one last week. And what did they do? And, oh man, the other Doug's ahead of me, or Judy's ahead of me, or Shirley, or whatever. And I would rank myself based on hours.
Yeah.
And I would basically assess my worth based on the number of billable hours I would have. And that would give me then some, strut, some confidence, some swagger in knowing that I was putting in the most hours. And it wasn't until later in my career that I kind of woke up and said, what the hell are you doing? how stupid is that? How ridiculous is that?
Right.
And why do we use that as a measurement of our value? And there's a really easy answer why, because that's how we've always aligned value. The more billable hours you have, the more money you're bringing into the firm, into your own firm or a big firm or whatever firm you're at. Like the score is kept by hours billed,
which is a ridiculous concept. I mean, there's some industries that do that. The trades come to mind, but think of like a marketing agency. If you paid a marketing agency by the hour, you'd be kind of pissed off. You want to pay for the results. You want to pay for the clicks, getting your return on ad spend down. You want a result in metrics, not how much time they spent getting that result. So it's a backwards business model, and it's hard to get away from, though.
Well, hang on. What you just said there, I think it's important to note. It's a backwards business model. Now, I want to just put some color on that. A lot of our work is focused backwards. A lot of our work is on tax returns from last year, is on audits from the most recently completed year. So a lot of our work is backwards. And so the most we can get is whatever it takes to do the work that's been, or for the period that's already been completed. When you get to marketing, or when you get to CAS or some other services within accounting, you're talking about the future.
Right.
And there's more value in that future and what the potential of it could hold than in that backward thought. And in just getting a return that someone has to do because the IRS wants it, or the audit that has to be done because the SEC or the bank or whoever requires it. Right. Because we can't necessarily wrap our minds around the value of that historic effort. The only thing we have is time, the time it takes to do it. We don't focus on the value that it brings. Why? Because we don't believe sometimes that there's value in what we do. Now, how messed up is that to say out loud?
Sure.
Well, it's true. Accountants sometimes are the worst at valuing the work that they do because they feel almost guilty for having to charge their client for some of the stuff that they do for them. Almost hesitant to say, oh, yeah, we'll do last year's return. And can I bill you this much? Is this okay? Is this something you'll accept? Is this what they're charging next door? Like we've been trained to think backwards around not only our value, but in the time that we spend. And it has become the true measure of our value. At least it has been historically.
Right.
So the system is built for us to feel the way that we do. And putting such an emphasis on time as being the measure of our worth. And instead of time, the measure of our worth really should be on the value that we're providing. And looking at a tax return or an audit, it is the benefit of being able to, get the loan that you want for your business and the audit that you have to require it. It is to be able to produce those tax records, either for the IRS or for a business or for an acquisition or for whatever it is you're doing, and having that done. I mean, that's the value that's being provided. The more we focus on the compliance aspect of it, the more we lean into the hours.
That's a good point. So we have to look at what other services can provide value as opposed to, the
services, sure, but I'm just talking about perspective. There are services certainly that are forward-looking and value producing in the future, but just the perspective around what we do. There's a system out of the University of Michigan called job crafting. And in job crafting, you look at what you do in three different ways. You look at the tasks you perform, the relationships you have, and the cognitive perspective you hold for the work you do. The task being, I do taxes. I prepare tax returns and provide that service to clients. The response or the relationships are, me and my client, me and the staff, me and the industry or the niche. It's the relationships you have within them. Each of those two things you can craft so you're doing more of what you want to with who you want to.
Right.
But that last piece, the cognitive piece, like one of the biggest, most impactful things perhaps I can say in this dialogue today is to consider the real value of what you're currently doing beyond time. Like look at it from a different perspective. Look at it from a bank or a potential merger target, or from the loan you're trying to get. Like look at it from those perspectives, and then you start to find more value in what we do. Like those were tax returns that you do for just a small family. They're going to be used for purposes other than filing for the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be, part of their financial records, their history. They're going to use those returns in certain transactions or events in their lives, or, worse, like divorces, horrible things too. But there's value that is produced from doing that beyond the time that is spent doing it.
You bet.
And until we start to consider the cognitive perspective we hold for the work we do, the more we're going to default to time and that just horrible hamster wheel that you get on there.
Right. Well, and busy, to me, when someone says busy, I just hear reactionary, reaction instead of intentionality.
Like they got there accidentally and they didn't mean to get there, but they got there.
Right. So they're in an unfortunate circumstance that they're busy, and it kind of comes off that way. And so when someone says they're busy, and I don't know why it's looked at as a positive attribute, and maybe it really isn't looked at as a positive attribute. Maybe it's just what the industry
try to say it. So I'm going to ask you if you're busy, and I want you to respond in a positive way that you're busy. Okay, you ready? Sure. So how's work?
It's busy but productive.
See, that didn't come off as positive. That came off as like he's just saying that he's productive, right? He's like, that doesn't sound that great,
right?
But like to be like, I'm busy, I'm so busy,
I'm so busy.
Right? It doesn't get said often, right?
No,
but I think you make the point. Why is because usually it implies that you got somewhere you didn't intend to go.
Mm-hmm.
You got too far, got too deep, got too much, got too many. But what's the right way to answer it? Like you started us off by saying swamped is something that has some negative connotation. I turn that into lying and saying that I have capacity when I don't. Like if you grabbed a CPA and said, how's your practice going? What would be the best response that you could get?
I would say something that's authentic, saying we're growing, but we have challenges, and it's busier than I want it to be right now, but we're working on things, on systems to reduce those number of hours.
See, I want to hear like I'm thriving.
Sure. Yeah.
Or I am in love with my practice right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have the best day every day. Now, I'm sure there's some folks listening to this right now that are like, bullshit, because those words wouldn't come out of my mouth anytime soon. And nor am I saying they should at the moment. But that should be the goal. That should be where we're heading, is not towards busier, more hours, less capacity, no capacity, negative capacity, like getting to a point where, we really, those words want to come out of our mouth of how proud we are of what we've accomplished and where we've reached. But if you look around still, even though this is not news, if you look around still in public accounting, small, big, in between, the measure of value, worth, is on the number of hours worked in a year.
Mm-hmm. Regardless if those are effective hours or not.
Right. Well, because there's no other real measure there. They can use realization, possibly, but that still is a factor of time. Mm-hmm. They could use profit, which still has some elements of time, obviously. But to actually have a mechanism to judge performance outside of time is just something that's not necessarily as available as it could be or should be.
Right.
Well, but my favorite thing was when I had and I was an audit most of the time. So, if I had an engagement team out on an audit, I tell them, listen, get this done this week. I don't care if you get done on Wednesday. I don't care if you get done Friday at 5. And hopefully you don't get done on Saturday.
Right.
But whenever you're done, you're done. Like, stop. You don't have to keep going. And in fact, you get to go home. Mm-hmm. So you get to take a day or two off. If there's other stuff in the office you need to be doing, that's great. But just get it done and get it done as efficiently and effectively as you can. I'm touching on something here called Parkinson's Law, which if anyone, I may throw out a couple book ideas today, but that one is a critical read, and it's an old read. I want to say it's from the 30s or the 40s. It's just old.
That's the name of the book.
The Parkinson's law. Yeah. And it has two components to it. One is super important, and it is that work expands to fill the time we allow for it. That's the law. And, best way I can describe it is, if you had on your calendar a 60-minute meeting with your team to talk about planning for an engagement, planning for a tax service, everyone will come together. Hopefully they'll come together on time. Usually they don't. The meeting will start. There'll be some niceties spoken to, some conversation started. Did you see the Nuggets? Who are the Savannah Bananas? They will go into, just some general conversation. Then someone will rope them in and say, hey, we're here to talk about planning for this client. And then the conversation may have some meat on that bone for a little while. But now it's been 45 minutes and we're still in the meeting and it was scheduled for an hour. So what are we going to do now? Well, let's talk about another client. Right. Or let's talk about what we're doing this weekend, or we're going on vacation this summer. Right. And so we fill the time because what else are we going to do?
Right.
But in reality, that hour-long meeting should probably only be like 30 minutes.
Or no meeting at all.
Or no meeting at all, or an email or something that doesn't require that bringing together of all those resources. But because we're fixed on expanding the work to fill the time, we will find a way to fill it. We will find work to do. We will find a reason to continue to stay in that conversation or that meeting or that return or whatever it is, just because. Right. And that's why I'm a great big believer in saying, well, first of all, I've told clients universally, like, however many meetings you have, cut them all in half in time and see what happens. Just try it. And not once has anyone ever come back to me and said, oh man, we didn't get anything done and we weren't able to have full conversations and we couldn't do all we wanted to do. Everything I've heard from that effort has been, we got it done. We actually had a pretty productive meeting. It was quick. We got everything said that needed to be said and we moved on with our day and kept going. Same thing in public accounting and looking at a tax return or a client service or whatever it is. Like if we just continue to let it go and move forward, like we'll continue to find ways to work on it. We will find ways to make this better, to dive deeper into this, or to question this, or to do something more. And it just doesn't need to happen.
Right.
Like the more time you allow for it, the more work we'll find to spread into it. And I'm on my pedestal now, so I'm going to keep going. But one of the reasons why I think, or one of the things I think public accountants can do, and I'm going to get some chagrin from this, stop working on Saturdays. Just stop. Like it's probably unnecessary. I've had, in my own experience, before I'd read this book and understood this concept, I'd get to a Thursday afternoon and there was something I could have done. And I was like, I'm going to save it for Saturday. I'll get to it on Saturday. I'll work on it on Saturday. I'll do that then. And because of that, I would become less efficient in the work I was doing. I was taking longer to do things because I had Saturday. I was drawing things out, being more reckless with my time because Saturday existed. But if you cut Saturday out and said, you only have 5 days, whatever you can get done in those 5 days is all you've got. And let's just see what happens. My level of efficiency grew up. My effectiveness came, my hours went down, and I was still producing probably as much, if not more, than I normally would because I got a rest on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I could be full of shit, but I believe in that.
I mean, to put some context around this, I own a firm and I work a few hours a day. I mean, I've built quintessential lifestyle firm. I spend, maybe on a really busy day, 5 hours in front of the computer. The other times I can do most of everything I need to do for my phone, returning emails, things like that. But it's not impossible. I mean, you just have to put the right systems in place, create priorities on what actually needs to get done. Go through your clients, get rid of clients, raise pricing, everything we talk about. That's how you can get away from being busy. And I'm proud of where, I'm at with. So I have a 1-year-old daughter and I can spend a lot of time with her. And sometimes it's draining, but I'll look back and be very appreciative of myself for doing that.
Yeah, if there's one real surefire way to create efficiency and effectiveness is to have a life distraction. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, have a child, have a hobby, have a sport, Have something outside of work that you are utterly and totally engrossed in, because it creates a new pace when you work. It creates a new perspective when you work. And, I've worked with workaholics before, and, what's the best way to help a workaholic? Give them something else to do.
Yeah, sure.
Something that they value more and enjoy more and can possibly thrive in outside of work. And, lo and behold, they start working less because there's something else that they want to spend more time doing.
You bet. You bet. So you mentioned you had another book that you wanted to talk about.
There's lots of books. There's, the Parkinson's Law is probably my favorite time management book. Eat That Frog's another great one. Another one is, there's a book called, I may have mentioned this before, there's a book called The Science of Getting Rich, or Growing Rich, Getting Rich. And it was written in 1910. And this book was the origin of creative visualization. So it was the method in which you could imagine the thing that you wanted to accomplish in your life. And in this case, the book was riches, and create a plan towards achieving it. And one of the steps, and not necessarily that there's steps, but one of the process elements to it is make the most of every day.
Right.
Meaning, don't allow distractions. Don't allow your phone to interrupt you. Don't allow social media to interrupt you. Maybe take time to watch the Nuggets game. Take time to eat. Take time to spend some time with family. But remove those things that are not driving you or allowing you to take and build momentum towards the thing you want. And that perspective, I think, wake up in the morning and saying, what are the 2 or 3 things I can do to help grow my practice, or to help me find the ideal client, or to help me identify who I need to get rid of or cull from my client list. Like, those are the things that allow us to achieve the vision. Doing another return, while necessary, doesn't necessarily facilitate that effort.
Sure.
And so it's having that awareness of each day as its own day. We're not going to do tomorrow's work today. We're not going to focus on what we did yesterday today. Today, we just build whatever we can out of these moments we have as efficiently and effectively as possible, and not worry about tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I love that perspective from The Science of Getting Rich. It shows up again in another book called Think and Grow Rich. And the other great book is just the Power of Positive Thinking. I think I said that right. That came out in like the 50s, and it was really the source of the law of attraction. Attracting the right clients, attracting the right practice, visually, seeing it, moving towards it, believing it, reminding yourself of it day in and day out. I feel like I'm going on a diatribe here.
No, you're fine. Think and Grow Rich, that's an old book too. Napoleon Hill.
Yeah, it's an old
or
one.
Something. I think the best business books are the older books. And my theory is they weren't trying to sell anything then. They just wanted to put the information out there.
Yeah.
And now books written are trying to sell, a profit first plan or
they're trying to become
4-minute work week.
They're trying to become influencers. They're trying to create followers. They're focused not necessarily on providing the value so much as providing the product.
Right.
And, TED Talks and the books today, if you look at most of the business books that are out there these days, they all came from one of those older books. Or were inspired by one of those older books. Like, there's a source, and we're not going back so far as Aristotle or Aurelius, but there's a lot of stuff that we read today that is just taking an old idea and repackaging it and reselling it.
Yeah. Well, good. Any closing thoughts on this? This will be a short one.
I guess. What do we do with this? It's kind of where my head goes. And do we stop measuring time? I know there's some theory of thought out there that we should, stop recording time. Is that a waste of time to record time? And I think there's a position for that. And that's not necessarily what I would advise anyone just to stop doing, because so much of our businesses are tied up into the hours that we spend working on our clients. But if you did shift to, say, a value-based or results-based or quality-based performance system where you were awarding efficiency more so than hours, I think there's an opportunity there. And I think to celebrate the people that go over and above the expected amount of time they're supposed to work. I mean, are those to be celebrated?
Right.
Are those to be punished? Advised? I in that same printout I described where it showed how many hours people worked in the previous week, as I matured in my role and understood a little bit more about what I was doing to myself, I started to look around and see what other people were doing to themselves. And if I had, team members that were working over the expected hours, they'd get a call from me. And the first call was pretty simple. It was, "Hey, you all right? There was a lot of hours last week. Are everything going okay? Can we get you some help?" And they'd always say, "I'm fine. It was just a busy week, and there was a transaction, and the client needed me to do something. It was just that week." By the second or third week, you start to realize the problem. That this person's addicted to billing time,
right?
And they're going to make work for themselves so that they can stay high in their hours, either because they think that's what's expected, or how they value themselves, or how they perceive others value them. And I think that's the opportunity.
When you put metrics on people, you get what you measure. So the measurement that they're after is hours. So they've inadvertently incentivized hours at possibly the detriment of that person, and maybe the company, maybe not, but that's what they get because they count in hours. So they're going to get a shit ton of hours. So what other, this is rhetorical and another conversation, but what other metrics could you look at that create incentives that might be more effective other than hours?
Quick point. I started working with a professional last week in public accounting, and this individual was told that unless he got his hours down to, I think it was like 2650, his bonus would be adjusted downward.
Oh.
And so what do you think he did?
He knocked his hours out.
He ate time. So he just didn't book it all. He still did it. And he got down to the level he was supposed to get, but not because he cut back on his hours. He just stopped recording some of them. Like, that's the mentality that's out there.
Wow.
Like it's out there just to, whether they even get to publish their hours or not, they still do it. Why? Because work expands to fill the time you allow for it.
Yeah.
What are the other metrics? I think there's a pendulum that swings between don't take too long and do it quicker. And depending on which way you swing that pendulum, it could have a negative effect on how people are working. But for me, it's just to really celebrate those that are getting it done efficiently and effectively. And how you measure that usually is going to be either based off a metric of time, or off of profit, or off of, realization, or whatever it might be. But just to shift the mindset of, we're not trying to get as many hours. We're trying to get as few of hours, and then building a system of support around it to encourage that effort. Are we doing all the work we should be doing? Are we doing too much of the work? Are we doing things we shouldn't be doing? Let's get it done. Let's get it out. And let's move on. I think there's that perspective shift, that mindset shift that has to happen. But the number one thing in my mind, outside of the work expands to fill the time, is we just have to stop celebrating it.
Yeah.
We have to stop using it as that badge of honor that, I worked a 3,000 hour year and carrying some swagger because of it. Like, that's just wrong. It's just
rational people pity you rather than celebrate them. And
outside of accounting, right? Like, everyone else looks at it like you're an idiot. Like, why are you doing this to yourself?
Right.
It's because the system was built to allow for it and to encourage it. And that's where the money comes from. And so there has to be a complete shift. And there's another dial here that needs to be turned, which is getting more value for the work that's being done. Why? So we can decrease the amount of hours we're spending and still retain the right amount of income.
Yeah. And at the same time, increasing capacity.
Right. Well, and I think maybe to the point of this, around this conversation, is it doesn't necessarily mean you fill it with more work. You fill it with more life. You fill it with more opportunities to be with your family or your daughter, or to watch more than just one Nuggets game. Decrease. I worked with someone recently that small business owner, maybe $500,000-$600,000 tax practice, and they want to bring financial planning into their firm. And that's just something they see as valuable. And I agree with them. I think it's a great offering for existing clients. Problem is, how do you find time to study? Do you take the CFP or the PFS? Do you get your master's? How much time is that going to take? Where's that time going to come from? Well, raising prices, increasing capacity, leveraging resources, technology, AI, whatever you want to bring into it, creating time is the key to creating the life in the business that we want. It's why we came into this. It's not to be busy.
Right.
We didn't get into accounting to be busy. We came into accounting to have freedom and flexibility and good incomes.
And you certainly didn't start your own business to be busier. The point of most people starting their accounting firm was to buy that freedom from their employer,
So help me fill in this blank. Busy is bad. What is good?
Intentionality, focus. I like building instead of busy. I like to, instead of swinging the hammer 50 times to put a nail in, I'm gonna go buy a fucking nail gun and get it done and build up, Yeah.
So for me, the word is flexibility. Which may rhyme with capacity.
Sure.
But just the ability to choose, just the ability to have time to decide what's next, or how you want to spend it, or who you want to spend it with, or what you want to spend it doing. To me, that is freedom. At the end of the day, is the ability to choose how you spend your time and where you spend it with who and doing what.
And if you want to put that freedom to more hours, go for it.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not one to judge necessarily, but I just say we have to break the mindset so that we have the capacity to design the world we want. There's a thing called Eisenhower box, and I'm sure some folks know about this, but supposedly Dwight Eisenhower would organize his time using a grid. Now I've learned since that that's actually bullshit. He didn't do it. But they call it the Eisenhower box because at a speech he quoted this theory, and so they attributed it to him, even though it wasn't him. I digress. Eisenhower box is a grid, 2x2, and at the top you have things that are important and not important, and on the side you have things that are urgent or not urgent. And supposedly Dwight Eisenhower would come into work and he'd say, "All right, I'm going to get this pile of papers. I'm going to put it into 4 piles. And one pile was urgent and important. What do you think he did with that stuff?"
Got it done.
Got done. Yeah. That's like deadlines. Client needs you. Client has a question, needs you to answer it today. It's the stuff that just needs to get done.
Yeah.
Now, what about the stuff that was not urgent and not important? What do we do with that?
Delegate. Don't do it at all.
Throw it away. Get rid of it. And that's stuff like social media, Angry Birds, too much Netflix, binge watching, stuff like that. That's just stuff that we can just cut out, get rid of. And then we've got the box that was not important, but urgent. And what would he do with that?
Interesting.
You said it a minute ago. Delegate.
Delegate, sure.
If you have the means, if you have the ability, either through resources or software or technology or whatever, get rid of that stuff, give it to someone else to do, or something else for the accomplishment of those tasks. And that leaves the last one. And the last one is not urgent and important. And what do you think he did with that stuff?
Probably never touched it.
Probably. He had to fight like hell to find time to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because time doesn't just show up on our calendars to say, "Hey, guess what? Now you get to do something that's super important, but not urgent."
Right.
Because it's always trumped by urgency. Urgency drives us.
Yeah.
But to do some of the work that you and I have talked about in some of these conversations, we have to focus on that box of not urgent and important. We have to create time for that, because that's where intention happens. That's when you go through a list of clients that you should keep or get rid of. That's when you do some networking so that you can find more of the types of clients you want to have. That's where you come up with what your ideal client looks like. That's where you address the fear. That's where you create a system of more in and a lot more out. Like that space is ultimately what needs to be created. And in a place where the billable hour is king, that's urgent and important time.
Right.
But we have to create, a king that is the work that is super important, but just does not have a deadline. It's like a physical, hopefully you get a physical every once a year. I try to.
Yep.
And why do we not make that such a big deal? Because there's no urgency around it.
Right.
Like, we got to get our physical. I'll put it off till next month, or I don't want to go today. And we cancel it because there's without urgency. Well, something happens to our health and we haven't been checked out. All of a sudden that moves into the urgent box, right?
Yep.
And that's not a pleasant place to be, especially in the case of health. But from a client's perspective too, if we're not reaching out to our clients, we're not serving them well, it's not urgent that I go out and meet with them and talk to them. Well, all of a sudden they call and say, hey, I'm going with another preparer. And you just never came out to see me. You never really worked with me. I never really felt like we had the relationship that I wanted. So I'm moving on. All of a sudden it's urgent, right? But now it's urgent to find and replace that client with another one.
Right. And that's where that not urgent, important box, that's where growth and change happens. The more time you can spend, that's where the change is going to take place.
Yeah. So you thought this was going to end 10 minutes ago. Now here we are 10 minutes later.
Well, that's right. Well, I appreciate it, Doug, as always. We'll see everybody next week.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Practicing Accountant podcast. We hope today's discussion on redefining success and moving beyond the busyness mindset has given you valuable insights to improve your practice. If you find this episode helpful, please share it with your colleagues and leave us a review. Join us next week for more tips and strategies to help you build a successful and fulfilling accounting firm. Thank you very much for watching. We wish you well. Goodbye.